Welcome to Tangential Soup, a weekly podcast discussing life in Australia, technology, food, fitness, and the like, hosted by myself, David Caddy, Melburnian independent developer and tea enthusiast, as well as my good childhood friend Alexander Carr, Sydney-sider, slave to the man, karate practitioner, and lover of adventure. This week we talk about Elon Musk's boring tunnel, Tesla trucks, Tesla Autopilot, the Emoji Movie, and solar thermal plants. We talk about Elon Musk stuff a lot.
I gotta say, I'd be a bit of an Elon Musk fanboy though.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are. Probably myself included. There was another thing that I almost linked you that SpaceX were doing a launch and a recovery of one of their Falcon 9 rockets, I think, today or yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Not that that's super novel because they've done that particular model before, but another test.
Oh well, it's always good. One step closer. Have you seen that they've released what the spacesuits will look like for SpaceX? They actually showed a prototype.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I mean it looks basically as they have them in the movies. So I mean obviously they've got the visor and it's just a white suit, but looks very stylish and futuristic. It's always cool to see these things, I think. Just take you into the future a bit.
Was there any sort of advanced technology that went with that, or just the styling of the suit?
As far as I'm aware, it's just a picture of the suit, so I
Okay.
don't know what it's going to contain.
So these spacesuits are very distinctive. You'd recognize them as SpaceX astronauts?
Not necessarily, no. Well, no, I mean, not that there's any real competition apart from
the NASA
ones, obviously
right?
NASA.
Cosmonauts.
Well, yes, I suppose they are. They're distinctive from NASA, but again, they could actually belong in any futuristic space movie. So, yes and no.
Okay.
All right, well, let's jump into it then. The first story was the... Oh, yes. I find this a bit funny because basically Elon Musk, as we've discussed previously, has a tunneling company.
The Boring Company.
The Boring Company.
Yes.
And there's been an article published in Wired.com by Arian Marshall titled "Elon Musk is about to test his tunneling tech under LA." And basically what Arian has said is that the Boring Company has actually come from a single comment that Elon has made about driving through LA and being stuck in LA traffic, which is apparently quite bad. I've never been to LA, but
I imagine it would be.
Yes, well, it's a busy city. And he has decided that he wants to solve this particular traffic problem with tunnels. And being Elon Musk, he is then set to doing exactly that. But it seems to me that he's not using any particularly innovative technology to do so. He's simply using existing technology with perhaps a few minor tweaks to it, and then perhaps his tunneling technique will be better. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't actually seem like there's anything that special about it. He's just decided to be the one to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that he said that because the tunnel boring machine that they're using is sort of a off-the-shelf, if you will, machine, but that they're quote-unquote supercharging it. What that exactly means, though, no one's really that sure of, I don't think.
Because it's supposed to be quicker than existing technology.
Yeah, I think they might just be running at a slightly faster speed and sort of replacing the blades a bit faster, and or maybe using a different material on the blades or something. Which, you know, an advancement's an advancement. If you can get through quicker, that's cool, but it's not super special. Do you know if this is just going to be an ordinary road tunnel, though? Because I know the ones that they were testing the other day, they actually laid this track along it, and the idea would be that you attach vehicles to like a bit of a train bed sort of thing and then shoot it through the tunnel to the other side.
Well, I don't actually think that anyone's fully aware of what it's going to be. But that kind of technology, it seems to me, is going to be a bit impractical to implement on, well, I suppose on a smaller scale. If you're just looking at doing testing on your... Because, I mean, at the moment, really all he's doing is just testing his digging equipment. I'm not, as far as I'm aware from reading this article, it doesn't seem like he's actually putting this technology in there, although they do mention that he wants to put rails inside some of the tunnels, and also some of the tunnels to contain his hyperloop idea, which you've heard of. I assume his idea to put a tube along a long stretch of or between two cities basically, and then shoot people along inside carriages inside this tube.
Yes, there's a few companies working on that now, actually.
Well, it's a good idea, I think. I mean, potentially it could be fantastic. This kind of could almost launch into something else, which we didn't put in the topics list for today. The Chinese fast trains.
Oh, right, yeah. The newly launched, even faster bullet train in China.
Yes. Do you know when I was in China, I actually travelled on one of their... I don't know if it was a bullet train, but it was quite fast. And I know at one point we reached... what was the speed? Because when we were travelling on it, they actually had a screen that was showing how fast the train was going. And I think it was 250 or 300 kilometers an hour.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And when you're inside the train, I mean, this probably goes without saying for some people, but you can't actually feel the speed. It's just...
I imagine it's like being in a plane, to a degree.
Essentially it is, yeah. You just get a little bit of... you feel the acceleration a bit, and then once you're at speed, it's...
Yes, it's the acceleration you feel. It's when you're at a constant speed, it's basically the same as standing still. They cover some crazy distance over there too, I understand.
Well, yeah, the one I went on, I think I was on the train for about an hour, but the equivalent on a slower train would have been about 3 hours, I think. So, well worth it. And I know in Victoria as well, they have they put in the fast rail back when I was still living there, but they didn't do it in the same way that China did it, because I believe what China does is it purchases land in a straight line from point A to point B, so that when their trains run, they run in straight lines, which means that they can run at a constant speed. But the Victorian government kept the existing train, or the existing kind of land that the existing lines were sitting on, which is not in a straight line, so it curves. So the speed the trains could get up to was actually severely hampered by this fact. And also by the fact that these fast rails don't work very well in the Victorian heat.
Yes.
Which, for some reason, nobody thought of.
I mean, the trains here that we have now anyway couldn't really reach anywhere near that speed. They could definitely go faster than they're currently able to, because you're right, the track conditions just aren't really up to it. There's certain sections where they do go pretty quick, but you're right, over the average over the journey is nowhere near what they have in China.
No, it's not. But I believe what affects the tracks in Victoria is the fact that when they get too hot, the metal that they're made of actually warps. So to take a train over these slightly warped tracks might cause them to disrail.
Yes, well, they expand to a degree, and then they sort of are under tension against the rest of the line. And then if you apply a train load on top of it, it's potential that there could be a derailment. It's not as structurally sound, that whole environment.
It's amazing that obviously I assume this was approved by lots of engineers, but
it's kind of fine. Like normally, even when it's super hot, well, maybe not all the time. When it gets ridiculously hot, they do put on buses. But when it gets averagely quite hot, they do still run. They just reduce the train speed by a lot.
But my understanding was that they reduced the train speed to a lower speed than they had when they didn't have the quote-unquote fast rails in place.
I'm sure that's true, yeah.
which is amazing.
Well, government infrastructure projects. It always sounds good to put in the fast rail, even if it can't be utilised.
That's the thing, is it? The key word there being fast rail, but it's not actually any faster at all.
Yes. Well, the rail itself is quite quick.
Yeah, the rail is very quick.
You just can't travel on it that fast.
Oh, amazing. Good old Victorian government. On the discussion of efficiency, some steps have been taken in the right direction. Again, by Elon Musk's company Tesla, who are developing electronic semi-trucks that will reportedly have a range of 200 to 300 miles per trip.
Yes, and they always make it look very mean in the marketing material.
Yeah, they do actually. So we're currently reading off an article called Tesla's electronic semi-truck will reportedly have a range of 200 to 300 miles, as I just said, by Sean O'Kane, which was published to The Verge on the 24th of August 2017. And it has a very ominous picture of a truck bearing down on you, and probably about to run over the person who's taking the picture, actually. Unfortunately for them, I suppose. But basically, something that actually struck me about this article, which wasn't anything to do with the contents of... Well, I mean, it is to do with the contents of the article, but not about Tesla or what they're trying to say. It's just about the fact that this article is actually purely speculation. And I think right at the end of the article, the only quote that they have from Tesla is, Tesla's policy is always to decline to comment on speculation, whether true or untrue, as doing so would be silly. So, while I do appreciate that The Verge have put a lot of effort into writing this article, it also strikes me that it's just purely speculation and possibly none of it's fact. Although I'm sure that Tesla are actually coming out with a semi-truck, because that part is fact, but the rest of it's just purely speculation.
Yes.
So, thank you, Sean, for writing your 500 words for us. But did they mean anything, I think is the question.
I don't know. But
on the case of electronic trucks, which will, I think, almost inevitably be in the future self-driving, it strikes me that most public transport could kind of go along this direction, and perhaps rails aren't actually the most efficient way to do things, perhaps.
I'm surprised there aren't more rail networks around the world that aren't run autonomously. There's a good one in Canada, in Vancouver, I think it is. And there is a few others around the world, but most of them are still man-driven vehicles. Which
actually seems very strange, because I work with someone who used to be a train driver. I mean, he's a train driver, and the things he's told me about the labour cost that goes into running trains just seems absolutely ridiculous, because basically what he's told me is that for every person that you have driving a train, you have 2 standby drivers waiting to back them up. And this is done because you've got to actually spread these people out around the rail networks. So you've got to actually have enough backup drivers to make sure that if something were to happen to these drivers, you have people to back them up. And so that the trains aren't ever actually stopping at one place for any one time, which would then completely disrupt the network.
Mm.
So basically, for every one train that you've got running, you've got 3 drivers that you are paying, 2 of which are actually just sitting in an office, unless they actually have to be used.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous.
And obviously, because the rail network is heavily unionized, they get quite decent overtime pay for doing this. And basically, it's a lot of money. Like, it's a lot of money that goes into just maintaining the people that work in these jobs. I mean, not that I'm saying that they shouldn't be working there, but maybe there is a more efficient way to do it.
Yeah, there totally is. I don't know whether it's like safety concerns or what, but like most of these networks are heavily computer monitored. Like a few weeks ago, Melbourne's metro line sort of ground to a halt because of a computer error for like 2 hours. Just everything shut down. So given the fact that it's already being sort of supervised and monitored to that degree by a somewhat intelligent system,
yeah,
I don't see what the reason is just not to cut people out of the loop entirely. It's probably going to be safer, if anything.
It does seem logical, doesn't it? Just going back to the fully autonomous train system in Vancouver, which I think I've ridden on. Is it the one that goes out to the airport? Do you know if that's...
It could be. It's been a long time since I looked it up, but I know it's pretty successful, hasn't had any major problems, and has been running a long time. But it could well be, yeah.
Okay. Because I think that was, from memory, was that a monorail system?
Yeah, it could be a monorail. Not that that makes a huge deal of difference, but yeah.
Well, I mean, no, it's all the same, really, isn't it? But yeah, okay. That's very cool. We have the technology. It's just, I think perhaps it's just maybe establishing the infrastructure. Because, I mean, surely the existing trains we have could all be run electronically.
Yes. Yeah.
It
would require some modification, but most of these things are automated anyway. Like, while you can sort of manually get past a signal stop, what you need to do is like roll the train up to it, brake hard, and then sort of go past it. Otherwise, the systems in place won't actually let the train go past it. So there is sort of like a manual override, but most of these things sort of make it so the drivers can't actually do the wrong thing anyway.
It's funny you say that, because several times on my line, I've been going into work and we've had to stop because of a broken signal. And it's been recognised as a broken signal, but the drivers can't drive past it.
Oh, so your ones can't do it in Sydney?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, it doesn't seem that we have that option, because I know that they've come over on the PA system and said the signal's stuck on red, we can't proceed past it. We just have to wait for technicians to come out and fix it. Which, yeah, seems ridiculous, because then what's the point in having a driver? But
well, that's what I mean. There's so much of the stuff that is taken out of control of the driver anyway.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like a huge step just to remove them entirely.
Although, I mean, that could possibly be a just a rule of the network that you don't proceed past a red signal. But
it could be.
It doesn't really make any sense. If you know it's a broken signal, it should be green. Why can't you just go past it?
Well, you've got to be absolutely 100% sure that, I guess, something isn't coming the other way if it's on a single line.
Yeah.
Which is why China recently relaunched their bullet trains, because there was an incident not too long ago where two of them came head-to-head, killed many people.
I wonder do you know what the reason for that was?
No, I don't. I meant to look into it, but I haven't yet.
Okay. It was actually surprising, because they collided head-on, and apparently about 40 people were killed, and like 200 and something were injured. But surely if you're in a bullet train and each of them is travelling 200 plus kilometres an hour, how could more people not be injured in that situation is my question.
Perhaps they weren't doing full speed.
Killed, rather, is my...
But yeah, it did seem kind of amazing to me as well.
Well, hopefully it won't happen again. I'm sure that they've probably identified the cause of the problem, and being China.
Train seems so safe, but then when they collide head-to-head... it's horrific.
Well, yes, that's true. But, I mean, it doesn't really happen that frequently.
No, it happens incredibly rarely, but when it does happen, it's carnage.
Oh, well, of course, yeah, but I mean, in my mind, planes seem so safe, but, you know, when they fall out of the sky, everybody dies, so...
I see your point, but planes are safe as well. Trains and planes are probably the two safest modes of transportation.
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah. I'm actually surprised about... My impression of riding on a bus is that it actually seems quite unsafe. Because you're travelling at decent speeds along quite crowded roads in which buses don't very easily fit. And it just surprises me that more buses don't crash.
And most people don't wear seatbelts if they're offered.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, we don't even have the option in Sydney as far as I'm aware. Well, certainly not on the major public transport ones around the CBD. Perhaps you can in the outer areas, but...
You're right, you don't see too many accidents involving buses for whatever reason.
No. I mean, there was one time when I was walking past a bus that, like, it had stopped at the traffic lights, and I kind of ducked under it, or kind of ducked past it to get like across the road, and I banged my head on the mirror, and that hurt. But,
oh dear, I hate hitting my head on things.
Yeah, no,
we're just too tall.
Do you get... Because whenever I hit my head on something quite hard, I get this feeling, and first of all, obviously I feel a bit dazed, then I feel quite angry at the thing, and it's just this irrational surge of anger I get, and I just want to, like, hit the thing that I've hit my head against, but I know it's an inanimate object, and I can't do anything about it, and hitting it is just going to make me sorer, but I just get that, like, maybe it's part of that whole, maybe, I don't know, fight or flight thing, and it's just my fight instinct coming up, so I want to bash it, I don't know, doorway or something when I bang my head into it.
When I was visiting Hobbiton over in New Zealand, the tour guide person was going to take a photo, and I had to get sort of inside the one little hobbit burrow that has, like, the door ajar. Hit my head pretty badly, so I was walking into it and then had to poke my head out and smile. Head throbbing.
Tears coming out of your eyes.
Yes.
You know, when I was traveling through Asia, Southeast Asia, all the doorways are quite short.
Yeah.
People are generally shorter. And I think I genuinely did some pretty severe damage to my brain a couple of times, because a lot of the times the door frames are made of stone.
Yeah.
So I walk through, and it's not like banging my forehead into it, which I feel is a bit stronger. It was just kind of quite severely grazing the top of my head.
Oh,
but, you know, actually hitting the bone on the top of my head.
It doesn't sound fun.
No, quite the opposite of fun, actually.
You should have worn a helmet.
I actually considered it. Being one of those people that walk around with a helmet on.
Well, I mean, people walk around here all the time with masks on their face.
Well, they do, yeah. They do. I mean, I think that's slightly different reasons. But...
Oh, completely different reasons, but it still looks funny and people do it, so, you know.
It's more to protect... My understanding is it's more to protect other people against you than it is to protect yourself. Because you wear the mask to stop your infectious germs going out. Is that correct?
I'm honestly not too sure.
Okay.
But the sheer number of people, especially of Asian descent, that do it, always makes me wonder what exactly the idea is. I thought you might have a better grasp on it.
Not really, no. Because, I mean, in Australia, that's... Well, I mean, I don't really know. I haven't talked to anyone who wears a mask, actually. But that was my understanding of why they're worn. But I know that when I was traveling through Asia, people wear them because of the air quality, which is a different story again.
Well, I know, you know, surgeons and that wear masks, and that's clearly to stop anything from them spreading into the person they're operating on.
Yes.
So it certainly works in that way, but it probably works both ways.
Although sometimes they end up leaving those same masks inside the people when they operate on them, and then they have to have them cut out.
Or wristwatches. Whatever.
Or wristwatch. It just amazes me that a wristwatch has ended up inside somebody. I mean, did it fall off the person's wrist, or did they take it off and put it inside the person, or did they take it off and balance it on the side of the opening and then forget about it and it tumbled in? Because, I mean, those are the only three explanations, really, aren't they?
Oh, hang on. This bit's just a bit tricky. I'm going to take off my watch for this. I'll just sit it here. And they turn around, bump... just sew it up. That's good to go.
Yeah, that's all right. I've done my bit. Yeah, interesting how it happens, but I suppose there's always a story. And I think that obviously the hospitals have to present their hygiene policies as highly as possible, and I suppose that policy-wise they might actually have these policies of, you know, making sure you're not wearing any external jewelry and blah 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 blah. But I think the fact of the matter is that when people are actually doing these procedures and when they're actually the actual people that do them probably aren't quite as rigorous as they should be 100% of the time.
Well, it's probably not really. I mean, it is their fault, but they work such long hours and they're always on call, these people. It must be a hard job.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
To have momentary lapses here and there is probably to be inspected to a certain degree.
Yes, it is, yeah. But, I mean, there's a lapse and then there's leaving a wristwatch inside somebody.
True. So some of these people maybe shouldn't be operating.
No. Possibly not. Back on topic of our decided topics for the day. More Elon Musk.
More Elon Musk. Yeah. More Tesla.
Yeah, more Tesla. So in this particular case, again, this article Another one by Sean O'Kane, actually, titled Elon Musk Promises Self-Driving Abilities Despite Engineers' Safety Concerns report. Was again published to The Verge by Sean O'Kane on the 24th of August. Actually, he's on a bit of a roll. Again, it was all speculation and anecdotes, which basically relied on another article published to the Wall Street Journal that suggested that Elon Musk is ignoring safety concerns to go ahead with his Autopilot features. Now, this seems a bit strange to me. Look, I know that Elon Musk is a very driven person, but I'm sure that Elon Musk understands as clearly as anybody else that it only takes one incident and potentially Tesla is finished.
Yes.
It only takes one. So the idea that he would be ignoring safety concerns to go ahead with his auto driving system to me, seems a bit ridiculous. It seems to me that some former employees have been a bit concerned over his I think they're suggesting his cavalier attitude towards just pushing the technology through and getting it into the marketplace. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, David? Do you think he would be someone to do this?
Well, he's definitely ambitious, and I dare say I could see him maybe being not 100% safety conscious as some or as most auto manufacturers. But again, he's not silly. So you're right. If there was big concerns, I doubt he'd ever release it.
Yeah.
Maybe these are small concerns, and the way that they could fail was sort of, I don't know, not catastrophic failure, if you know what I mean. Still potentially not great, but a system like this obviously also benefits hugely by having people use it out in the real world and then bringing that data back in. So I could see the rollout maybe being a tiny bit premature, but given the fact that it's been out in the world now for a reasonable amount of time, and there hasn't been, I know there was that incident with the truck.
Yeah, there has been one incident where someone was killed using an autopilot system.
Yeah, but that was sort of an abuse of the system by that individual, thinking that it was going to do more and can do more than it was ever designed and advertised to do. So in that case, it's still actually user error. I don't think there's been any documented cases of the autopilot itself being operated correctly, doing anything wrong. And it has been out there for many months now, so I would say that it's fairly safe. It seems like it, at least. So even if there were concerns, they clearly weren't. I feel like Elon must have weighed them up, and he made the right call, judging by what's happened so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if he were to release anything prematurely, as you said, it would definitely not be with anything that would actually make any major differences. He's obviously just a big picture person, doesn't like getting caught up in the little details, and perhaps that's what's upset people.
Maybe these people are just somewhat disgruntled employees because, like we've discussed previously, Elon works his team very, very hard.
Yes, he does, yeah.
And doesn't like no for an answer, so...
Well, that's how he gets results, I suppose. Speaking of results, David, have you heard that there is a new Emoji Movie out? And I bring this up because emojis have been a topic for us before.
I have seen this. There's a particular YouTube channel that I watch called Jack's Films that have sort of been making fun of this for months and months in the lead up to it. And covered it so extensively that the people involved in the Emoji Movie actually invited him to the premiere.
Really?
Which is pretty funny. But I haven't actually seen it, but I've heard it's not the best film.
Well, David, it has got a whopping 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I think that it's everything that we expected from an Emoji Movie and maybe a little bit more.
I can't believe Sir Patrick Stewart put his voice to one of the main characters.
I wasn't aware that Sir Patrick Stewart was involved, but I think that maybe if people were a fan of Sir Patrick Stewart, perhaps they're
I'm still a fan, but maybe slightly less.
slightly less of a fan.
Lost
yes,
a little tiny bit of respect, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just dropped off a little bit.
But money is money, I suppose.
Well, money is money, and we all make poor choices every once in a while. So,
Yes.
I suppose. Yeah, that's a thing. You know what it reminded me of, though? Obviously, I haven't seen the movie, but just the whole premise of it. Do you recall that Adam Sandler movie Pixels?
Yes, I actually have seen that.
You have seen it.
Yeah.
Were you as impressed by Pixels as you suppose you would be by the Emoji Movie?
It had a couple of moments that I laughed at, which, yeah, I'd say is probably all that could be expected from the Emoji film.
Okay. I think the Emoji film might be worse then, because 8% on Rotten Tomatoes is pretty awful.
It is pretty bad. What's Pixels got?
Good question. Definitely something worth looking at. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. Drum roll. 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. So actually, it's twice as good as the Emoji Movie.
Not having seen the Emoji Movie, I think that's probably fair.
Oh dear. The critics' consensus for the Pixels movie was that it's much like the worst arcade games from the era that inspired it. Pixels has little replay value and is hardly worth a quarter.
Harsh but fair.
But speaking of actors who have performed in bad movies, who plays Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones? The bloke with dwarfism?
Peter Dinklage?
Peter Dinklage was in the Pixels movie, I think, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah. He was okay.
Okay. You know, for such an awful movie, it still made $66 million at the box office.
Well, you know, when you have retro games and some amount of star power shoved into a film, you always get some amount of return.
You do. Amazingly.
As I'm sure the Emoji Movie is probably done better than its cost, at least.
Well, that's it in the end, really, isn't it? These movies, they're not works of art, they're just investments. So as long as they perform and return, that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, enough about horrible movies. I'm sure that we could go on if we really wanted to.
I feel like to bring up a movie that both of us haven't seen, it's done well in a sense, right? It's
It has
got
actually,
its
yes.
name out there.
It has. On to more tech innovation, David. The state of South Australia is putting in place a solar thermal power plant that will be the biggest of its kind in the world and potentially supply 100% of the state's energy needs.
Yes, in Port Augusta.
Yes, which is obviously amazing. So by 2020, after 2020, the state of South Australia could have 100% of its energy needs met by renewable energy.
Yeah, it seems like South Australia is really pushing ahead with this sort of stuff, which is fantastic.
Well, they are, and I mean, it's kind of tagged, or it's kind of calling itself the flagship state for this kind of thing. But in my mind, this technology already exists across the world. It's already been proven to be cheap and usable. Why are we just doing it in South Australia? Why are we not doing it across the rest of Australia?
I mean, that's a very good question. Clearly, people in charge of South Australia have the buy-in for this sort of stuff, and other people don't care.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess so. Maybe.
Because this is clearly government supported, at least, even though it's a private enterprise.
It is, yeah. No, it's the federal government's put money into it, as is the state government.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess just something that Australia doesn't want to get involved with for some reason or another. Well, not some reason or another. I think we've talked about it previously. The fact of the matter is there's so much money in fossil fuels still that it's hard to drag that away towards renewable energy.
Mm.
But it's disappointing nonetheless.
It is, yeah. For the people playing at home, this solar thermal plant is one of these where it has a huge array of mirrors surrounding a tower in which the beams of light coming from the sun is focused onto the tower, the top of the tower, which superheats a salt solution, which then drives a turbine and then generates electricity that way, which is great for very warm environments, sort of desert environments almost. I think this particular technology, or this particular company, has already put one in Nevada or somewhere in the States. So, yeah. It's certainly ideal for Australia, this sort of thing.
Well, it is, yeah. Do you know if it's more efficient than just using solar panels?
That's an excellent question.
It seems to me that obviously there was bidding on this project, and this solar thermal solution won the bidding. So I assume it would be, because I know that solar panels are actually quite expensive to install
and maintain. I imagine this has less maintenance costs associated with it. I feel like the efficiency, I don't actually know this, but it's probably similar.
Okay.
Like, there's probably not a hugely clear winner. There probably would be a winner, but I don't know which way it would go. But this is probably cheaper overall, like you say, to install and set up.
Well, because I suppose you're only using mirrors for the most part. I mean, most of the material would be mirrors.
Yes.
And then you have the whatever's in the tower. So we're actually reading this from an article titled "The Solar Thermal Power Plant Announced for Port Augusta, Biggest of its Kind in the World," which was published to the abc.net.au by an unknown author. But it actually has an image of the solar thermal tower in action, and basically it's got hundreds of mirrors which are angled to, I suppose they're on hinges, so they catch the sun at whatever time of the day is appropriate, and then they focus it onto this particular tower, which really just has a bright spot up the top, which is where all the salt sits. It's a pretty salty solution.
Yes.
Oh, it's the best joke I've ever made on the podcast.
It's also good for Port Augusta as a town, which was formerly quite a mining community, but a lot of that's moved away. So this will generate some amount of jobs in that for the region.
Yes, yeah.
Which is another positive.
It is another positive, yes. These things are obviously incredibly important.
I'm glad this is going ahead by the looks of it, because this was announced at an earlier stage a while back, and there were some doubts cast on it that the company would go through with it after the announcement of the battery technology coming to South Australia, because with that, the need for this sort of thing is reduced a lot in terms of it solving the blackout problems. But it still obviously provides enough benefit that they're going ahead, which is good.
Yeah. And as well, any excess power will be filtered onto other states.
Thanks again for joining me, Alex.
Not a problem, David. Pleasure as always.
You can follow and get in touch with us on Twitter at Tangential Soup, and you can find this week's show notes with more information about today's topics at tsp.fm/20. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider sharing it with anyone you think might also. And we'll talk to you again next week. Bye.
Ciao.
So you got a motorcycle license, Alex?
I did get a motorcycle license, yes. Well, I mean, obviously I've only got my learners. But as of actually a few weeks ago now, as of about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I am a fully qualified learner motorbike rider.
You're going to get a Vespa?
I'm not going to get a Vespa, no. So let me just briefly talk you through what my thoughts are. Let me just firstly say, I think for city driving, in almost every way, scooters are superior. So they're cheap, they're easy to maintain, and they're cheap to run. So they're cheap to maintain, they're cheap to run, and they're cheap to buy as well. And they're easier to ride than a motorbike as well. You ride in the sitting position, so and they're more comfortable to ride. Probably the only thing that stops me from buying them, and it is actually stopping me from deciding to go with a scooter over a motorbike, is I don't like how they look.
Aren't there some scooters out there that kind of look a bit more cool, I guess?
Look, I'm not saying they look bad, but I'm just saying a motorbike looks better, and I have my heart set on a motorbike as well. So I am going to get a motorbike over a scooter. I haven't yet purchased one, and I don't really know which one I'm going to get. But
Harley.
not a Harley, but actually the new Harleys look really good. Have you seen the? It's more of a sports bike.
I don't know anything about bikes.
I think it's called a Monster, maybe.
Harley Monster.
It is called a Monster. Yeah. So it's called a Harley Davidson Monster, and no, it's not called a Harley Davidson Monster. I've completely lied to you. It's not the bike. Sorry, 1 second.
I just found this great image searching for that term.
It's called a Harley Davidson Sportster. And it looks... Yeah, I know the Monster is actually a completely different bike, and it looks ridiculous. But the Harley Davidson Monster, they're actually really popular around Sydney. And I think they look really good, but they're also probably... That image is hilarious. Yeah, they're really popular around Sydney, and I think they look really good. But they're around $13,000, and probably my range for a bike is I want to spend about $2,000 to $3,000, and I want to get something that's probably going to be pretty crappy in terms of looks. It's not going to go very fast, but I want something that's going to be cheap, something that I can learn to ride on, and just basically a cheap beginner's bike. It's definitely going to be secondhand. That's all I want for myself. Then, you know, once I've passed my learner period, which is potentially it's now with the learner bikes in Australia, you've got to hold your license between 3 to 12 months before you move on to your probationary license. But once the 12 months expires, you've actually got to redo your learner's license if you want to go for your probationary license. So I've got a pretty specific time period that I've got to learn to ride a bit better on before I go for my Ps. But yeah, that's how it's gone so far. I'll keep you updated. I'll keep our avid listeners updated on how things are going.
Good old Bob Potato.
Bob Potato, yes, our number one fan. And we'll see how we go. I really do think that a scooter would, logically speaking, be such a better idea, but I just couldn't do it to myself, David.